All right, so for this right here, we are using the yellow and blue paint. This was for a little exercise we did in class before we started our final Fauvism painting. So we are going to be using that weird grab bag of tools that I sent home that has this little palette knife, the bubble wrap, a dirty little sponge, and we are going to be experimenting with a variety of ways to use these tools to paint. You remember from the PowerPoint that the Fauvists often were working so quickly that they would paint right out of the paint tube instead of putting it on their palette using a brush. They would also use their palette knives, which are typically used to mix paint pigments together, but they would just be slapping the paint right on and making their image using this. So they worked with a variety of unusual tools to get their work done quickly. Now what I want you to do with each of these tools is find 2 different ways to use them. And you can use one color of paint or both, it's totally up to you. But what I mean by using or finding 2 different ways is, first of all, before I start, I'm gonna label so I know that tool number 1 that I'm working with is the palette knife. All right, and if you don't know what something is, just try and guess as much as you can. And so for technique A that I am using, all right, I'm gonna take this palette knife, and one way that I can use this is just by stamping like this. So I can get a little bit of another color. You can wash it or not. And if I'm stamping like this, going every which way, that'll give you some interesting little textures going on there. Again, you can come up with your own way to do this. And then the next thing that I want to do is find a completely different way to use that tool. So what you could also do, instead of stamping, you can pick up one color of paint or 2, and you can also drag this through like this. If you use multiple colors, it gives you kind of a tie-dye effect, which is really neat. So again, this is how the Fauvists painted. So after you find 2 ways, you're going to move on to your next technique. So my other one is the sponge. So technique A, I got technique B. And while you're going through this, I want you to really analyze how this is coming out and think, okay, I could really use this in my final painting for your landscape. So if there's a technique that gives you an interesting visual effect that would work really well, then by all means use it. So one way we could use sponge painting is by dabbing like this. I had somebody who had a nice little tree in their landscape, and so they use sponges in multiple colors to do this, to get that kind of effect of leaves like that. So that's technique number 1 that I've got going on there, is just dabbing the sponge up and down. You get lots of dimension, lots of different colors. You can really blend it and mix it together with those 2 colors or not, so we get lots of different ones showing. Another way that you can paint with a sponge, gather up some more paint, 1 color or 2, and you can literally do strokes like this. So as you can see from my examples, even though I'm using the same colors of paint and the same tool, I'm getting 2 totally different visual effects just from the same tool by using it in a new way and finding a new technique for it. So experiment, have fun. We had a blast in this class, so I hope that you do too. And look and notice what you like the most and think what would be really good to have in your final landscape.